Thanks everyone for joining us today on the next podcast for My Next Property. Today we've got Steve Ash with us again, and Steve's built an amazing portfolio up to a value of $18 million. And today what Steve's going to do is to deconstruct the exact process, a 3-step process, in terms of what he did to get to that magic number. Steve, how are we?
Oh, thanks for that intro. God, you're really fluffing my pillows here.
It's my first intro. How'd I go?
Oh, you absolutely nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah, I think, what was it, take 15, was it?
It was actually. Thank you for letting the audience know that.
Yeah, I'm a bit like Stanley Kubrick. Just keep doing those takes. Anyone who kind of like is a bit of a film buff might know that one. But no, I'm really, really excited to sort of deconstruct this. And, you've done it yourself. And I think, one of the things I just want to set the scene on when we get into it is that the actual theory is actually fairly easy. The actually hard thing is the discipline in the application, as you'd know, because you built your own massive 25 mil portfolio too.
Yeah, and look, not everyone wants to get to 18 million, right? No. So we're going to talk about how we can get to that point, but some people mightn't have that aspiration, that goal. So we're going to talk about other scenarios, perhaps a little bit smaller than that they can.
Yeah, we will towards. Do. Well, in this pod, we're going to show you exactly those 3 steps to get to that mark, and at the end, we'll go back and we'll pull it back, and we can show that you don't have to do what we've done. This you can get a very sort of comfortable situation, and so certainly we'll touch on that. But one thing I wanted to talk about just before we get into this, a lot of people do just struggle to start and struggle to get past one property, or even struggle to do this alone. And we were talking about this off air with some of the clients who've come to us, but then people that we know, very successful individuals, but no net wealth. I mean, I know you've seen it.
I'm gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked with some of the things that I see. It's just, if not been in this business and then you talk to them just generally, you would walk away thinking, wow, they've got amazing lives and they've got this amazing wealth creation machine that sits behind them. But you get into the nitty gritty of some of these conversations and there's nothing there.
Yeah. I know they've got maybe this sort of like the Audi Q5 or whatever it might be, fancy house or whatever, sort of all the kind of like mod cons we're talking about, keeping up with the Joneses.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I never had any of that, and neither did you. But imagine what they could do with that income.
You just think of all of that. I think there was one of these things I read in a book, and sort of I think it was Warren Buffett, sort of like he never used to have his hair cut, or every time his wife back then would say, I'm going to have my hair cut or whatever, he'd be thinking, well, that's $15. If I invested that $15, and he was actually thinking 30 years later. Yeah. And those are the little differences that can be made. But for most people, with the ease of credit and bad sort of financial habits, people just don't do that. And they just get lost up. And by the time you know it, 5 years have passed, I think I'm bringing all the big guns in here. We've got Warren Buffett. I'm going to talk about Nassim Taleb, his amazing books if you ever get a chance, The Black Swan, Fall by Randomness. But he says the paycheck is one of the most addictive things that you can have. Yeah.
So it is. And over the years I've fallen into that trap. But you've just got to make that leap of faith. You've got to take that first step. And once you take that first step and you give that property some time to breathe, right? You do the reval on it and you see what outcome that can deliver you. And you look at that outcome against the salary that you're getting. It's addictive from that point. Once that compounds and it grows, it far exceeds any salary you're ever going to get in a fairly short period of time if you execute properly.
Now, this is actually gold in what Tom's just said there. He's just talked about time and letting time do its thing. And it's something of another sort of big name, sort of Charlie Munger. So really getting those assets, let time do their thing. It's so easy to get attracted to, the latest big screen TV, latest car or whatever it is. But if you can get those assets in, it's just incredibly amazes me how unforgiving sort of residential real estate is in terms of sort of wealth creation.
You can make so many mistakes, but you can still do well.
And it's that runway. Then if you're kind of really, you've got that runway in front of you, which is time, and you can make the benefit of that. So it's such an important point. And so many people listening to this, I mean, like I kind of made a remark yesterday, us being fuddy duddies, but we're not. We're pretty young. But a lot of people listen.
Talk about yourself, please.
I'll talk about myself. Yeah, a lot of people listen to this will be in their early 20s, mid 20s, and that's really time is their biggest advantage.
If I knew what I know now when I was in my mid 20s, my portfolio would be 10 times as large as what it is at the moment.
I mean, it would. All of that. You think about all of those kind of opportunities that you passed up.
The amount of beers I dropped, just the amount of money I dropped on beers and cars, and anyway. Let's not go there. Depressing.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's an important point, and it kind of sets the scene on this. So what we wanted to do was talk about the 3 portfolio construction principles that create millionaires. So
Let's do it. So let's break it down on step-by-step process and simplify this as much as we can for our audience.
Yeah.
So let's not, we've got a big number we're shooting for here, but not everyone wants that number, as we discussed. Some are happy with far less than that, and we'll talk about that. And also the other thing is, it doesn't have to be a 30-year type scenario, this whole wealth creation through property approach. And we hear a lot of these old school commentators talk about 30, 40, 50 years. It doesn't have to be like that, right? And Steve's going to talk to you about how you can do that in a much shorter period of time today over this process. So let's get into it. Step one, Steve, over to you. Do not stuff this up, please.
Do not stuff this up. I mean, I think it's a good point you make. We're actually going to deconstruct how you can build that 18 mil. So really the kind of theory is fairly easy.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you, because I don't think many people delve into it. There's some, obviously, others who've got amazing portfolios out there, but we're going to actually deconstruct how people are actually doing this.
Yep.
And so if you want to sort of follow this route and you're a young gun and you're ultra motivated, you can do this. But going to Tom's point, for most of us, we can show you exactly what you can do in the bare minimum, what you can do in 10 to 12 years. And it's pretty life-changing anyway. But for this, we're really going to sort of have an episode where you can shoot the lights out and we can show you step by step how you do it. So step one, we're going to call it the foundation principle here. And sort of like, we're going to take this sort of example I did, and we'll link it in the show notes. So I did a podcast with Todd Sloan at Peace and Property, and it was called My First Million. It was pretty well received. And I'm going to lift a lot of those sort of concepts for this first principle. But if we kind of step back and what we were just talking about with bad financial habits a second ago, about, kind of money coming in, money going out, there will have to be some sort of compromise to do that. So I know we've been through your story, absolutely inspirational, where when you started out, you had to go through those hard yards. You had to build up that kind of grub state before you started investing. I know I did. And
pickle sandwiches,
and for yourself, what you had to get that money before you went into, like, was it the sort of cockroach sort of palace, wasn't it? Indooroopilly?
Oh yeah, that was a shocker. Look, it wasn't a pickle sandwich for me. It was just being ultra razor sharp on every cent that went out of our household.
Yeah.
And just focusing on, is that going to create me wealth, or is that just going to get me into a worse situation? So discipline. And that's it. And it's the same in anything. You're trying to lose weight and get a six pack. You're ripped, aren't you, Tom? So all of these little things, it require discipline. All the good thing, staying away from whatever it might be. And so really you need to get those money habits in line to get this started. And the example I gave with Pizza and Property, we had a broker, shout out David Shee, who kind of modeled this out at Lempower. And really, we looked at a scenario where we had like a couple with household income 150,000. They saved up 100,000. They might have been gifted a little bit from their parents, but they really kind of maybe lived at home for a little bit. Really kind of scrimped and saved. For me, it was 5 years to get that amount of money before I started. So I think everyone has got to go through this almost kind of period, and it really does distill to get to something like this. You need discipline. And every great investor you hear, it's that first bit of savings you've got to create, and that's years for the most part, right? It doesn't happen in 5-6 months. You generally hear these investors talk that have built crazy wealth through property. It's 4 or 5 years before they get that first deposit to get into that property, right? So.
It is. I mean, there's other examples, another broker we work with.
And sorry to interrupt, but that's 90% of people you lost at that point. And they're not even started.
No, they're not. They're sort of down the pub doing whatever, but it might be taking a second job. Might be living with parents or whatever just to do this, but doing everything you can. Goes back to some of the principles, like where you kind of spend less than you earn, you sort of invest that sort of delta, and then it's amazing what you can do sort of in 5 years. But you kind of, to get to where we're getting to, you need to do this because this instills great, financial sort of hygiene, if you will, good sort of investing habits.
Set you up for the right mindset, right? For the larger portfolio.
Yeah, that growth mindset. Most of this is mindset. And it's the compounding to you're striving to get your next property. And that comes from what you've done before. Because the sort of value of the property, getting that up, that you just got to keep, hustling and pushing on, and that's what you've got to do. And that's going to be a theme of these 3 principles as we go through them.
Yep, absolutely. And getting those disciplines up at the very beginning, which naturally, if you're starting from nothing, you're going to have those disciplines built into your DNA, right? Once you start to scale the portfolio, you need them throughout the entire journey, because whilst it gets easier to grow your portfolio as you start with that great foundation, it's still challenging along the way also, not just in terms of trying to find that extra amount of equity to get into your next one or a different strategy to try to move into that other property, but it's also the challenges that you have with tenants along the way and issues with your properties and those sort of things. It's not easy, right? But you're ready for that because of the hard yards you did at the beginning.
Yeah, you get tested all the time.
I mean, we were at the pub yesterday, I was talking about, I think I had $10,000 worth of issues that came up with my portfolio in that one day. Just agents calling me left, right and centre about broken bloody air cons. And it's like, before I first started this, I would have probably fallen into a big heap. But you just become conditioned to deal with it and move on because you know the benefits are going to be there at the end of the day.
Exactly. They're just little roadblocks. Again, going back to that runway, you're going down that runway. You know where you're going. You've already hit all of these sort of goals anyway. Yeah. But you know that's just these things are going to happen. They've got to. I mean, was it 25 properties you got?
Yeah.
Or something like that? Yeah, we've lost count anyway. But they're going to be maintenance items. I mean, that's the downside. But the upside is that 25 mil portfolio, if you have a 10% growth on that, it's 2.5 million.
Exactly.
So that completely dwarfs any sort of...
And continue to bring it back to that number because that's what keeps the spark alight.
But it is. Yeah. I mean, it's motivating. It's motivating me just hearing it. Yeah, exactly. So who cares, like 10,000? I know that's a lot of money for people, but when you get to that, like that 10,000 could be 1,000, for example, like sort of boiler broken or something. Yeah. And it does feel like the end of the world, but it's just a case you can't have the 18 mil portfolio, or you can't have the 4 mil portfolio without the sort of like 1,000 expenses here and there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. So step number one. So I know you touched on it. Let's go into that more detail.
Step number one, the foundation principle. So we'll cover I'll just recap what we did with Pete's. Obviously, I've talked about like the scenario, the 150,000, household income that are getting, 100,000 deposit that's saved. Now, some people might actually then go and buy the dream house, and really that will completely white out a lot of the effort. So if you go and then just go and buy the best PPOR that you can get in the other area, that all goes out, and that really will hamstring you because you basically, it's like the keeping up with the Joneses. You're going to be paying for that. It's going to stop you from borrowing any more money and building any wealth outside, and you could be paying that loan for another 20 years before you can do something.
Massive weight on your borrowing capacity, right?
Huge. Absolutely. So that's something we shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. So there's two things that...
And we're seeing a lot of our clients now, just from our conversations, actually liquidating their PPR, right, based on the strategies that we're recommending in.
No, absolutely. Just it's almost like, 2 steps back to go 3-4 steps forward. Yeah. And sometimes you've got to do that and look at those things and be absolutely, again, laser focused. And it might be if people are happy having that dream PPOR, totally fine. But if you're not going to get to those sort of financial freedom sort of goals. Yep. And so you've just got to evaluate what your end goal is. And we can bring it in, like you can get the dream PPOR. You can do whatever you want, but the only way you're going to do that is if you invest wisely. Right. And that all starts from here and not doing something crazy out the blocks. There's 2 sort of things you can do. So you can rent vesting's obviously in the media a lot. I know we're both obviously excited about rent people who do rent vesting. So with the yield so low in Melbourne and in Sydney in these premium areas, it often makes sense to sort of rent there rather than buy. And then that obviously kind of extends your borrowing capacity. So that's one. And then secondly, it might just be if you do want to get onto the ladder, you go within your means. You maybe get a unit in a boutique block or whatever it is, where kind of where it still maintains your serviceability so you can keep going. Yeah. And so anything from yourself on rent vesting, I think it's a good strategy.
Look, that seems to be where everyone goes in this situation, and we've got a lot of our clients that go down that path. So just trying to remove that PPOR debt. As I said, it's just a massive weight on your borrowing capabilities. Yeah, you can get all that. Just wait, it'll come, and it'll be better. It'll be better than what you've got now, right? So.
Yeah. So delayed gratification.
Exactly.
And for people, I'm sure people are aware of what rent vesting is, but rent vesting is renting where you want to live and then using like your borrowing power just to build a property portfolio and build wealth in that way. So many ways to skin a cat. And in this particular situation that we drew up before, we had 2 fictional characters called Dom and Liv. And we sort of looked at that sort of rent vesting strategy on this household income. And we showed they had borrowing power to get 4 properties. And the idea was to get, and I'm just going to, again, you can have a look at the episode for the full thing. So for that sort of deposit, they're going to do an 88% lend on both properties. And so we're just going to keep it easy, just round numbers. So two $500,000 purchases, 88% lend. That sort of borrowing power stretches out there. They might be able to use grants in various states or whatever to sort of supercharge that. We look at the different tiers of lending. So a broker friend, David, sort of modeled that out. So the first two properties are with a tier 1 lender. So that means we've got a smaller interest rate. In this case, it was around about that sort of 5.9 mark with, say, Commonwealth Bank. And then for property number 3, they kept saving. They were able then to extract equities from the first two properties, get the third property maybe a year later. That's with a tier 2 lender, say Resimac, First Mac, someone like that.
Just for those that don't know, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Just break that down very quickly, the differences between the three and why they exist. It's
a great question. And if you go into a bank, most of us are getting a loan, we only buy PPOR. We'll go to the local bank, Commonwealth Bank, they'll service your borrowing capacity and then off you go. That's the tier 1 lender.
And you generally get better rates, right?
You get better rates, better products, offset account. Like the offset accounts work a little bit differently to the tier 2. So really you're looking at, your ANZ, CBAs, Westpacs, etc. So any one week can go into a branch and do that. So the concept here is that like depending on what your risk profile is that you kind of exhaust your borrowing power at tier 1, and then if once you can't get any more sort of borrowing capacity with Commonwealth, NAB or whatever it is, you look at the next tier of lending. Yep. So that could be your sort of entities like like Resimac, First Mac or whatever. Yeah. Where you're sort of paying a slightly higher interest rate. But again, you might be able to squeeze out that borrowing power just a little bit more.
Yep.
And then the final tier of lenders, that's tier 3. So it's almost like low doc lenders. That's like your Peppers and Liberty. They don't use the APRA serviceability buffer that APRA sometimes assesses on 2.5 above what you can borrow. Here, they don't do that. But the cost of doing business means you have to have a high interest rate when you go with these guys.
And what's the delta between a tier 1 and a tier 3 roughly?
Oh, God, it's a good question. You put me on the spot here. Yeah. So I'd say about 150 to 200 basis points. So to 2%.
2%,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a really good point you make. So if this fictional couple decided just to stick with the tier 1s, that means that they have 1 million in sort of a kind of exposure in their property portfolio, which is great.
Yep.
But if we kind of extrapolate that out over a cycle, and let's just say that then doubles, then they've made $1 million in equity. If we're able to use the different tiers of lender, then they've made $2 million.
Exactly.
So this is again compounding work into the advantage and really using the tiers. So it's a cost of doing business.
And you're paying a little bit more in your debt, right? But you look at that increase of that 2% you have to pay against the $1 million you're going to get.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's make sure you look at the bigger picture when you're making those decisions.
Absolute gold. I mean, how many times do you hear it like, I've got to pay I don't want to do like 5.95 and I want 5.8 but really we're looking at like in this case $1 million. Again, going back to mindset and
how many people have we seen not do things because of those little those little things.
Yeah.
And that's like, do the numbers, people. Look at the bigger picture here. It's like insignificant.
Absolutely. In like when we're looking at these things, and we've got to do this, we've got to look 10 years down the track, 20 years or whatever it might be. But these are such insignificant numbers. And then when we get into when we go through a cycle, it's really going to be apparent how little this is. But really just got to think this is a cost of doing business.
Yep.
By going with the T3 lender, tier 2. I don't know about yourself. Yeah, I've got 2 with tier 3 lenders at the moment.
Still do. Liberty, absolutely. Yeah.
Liberty.
And it tests you sometimes, but just look at the bigger picture, look at the growth you're getting, keep your eye on the ball, and you'll get through it. And it gets easier over time.
Yeah, and it does test you. Yeah, and it does get easier. And you might be able to refinance from a tier 3 to a tier 1 or tier 2, maybe in a couple of years or whatever, like if rents grow or whatever circumstances change. But to get into that marker, and we're just, again, talking about the 5% cap, if you're kind of worried about, say, an extra sort of 100 basis points, 1% loan, but you've got borrowing power to then get in, and we know what's coming into the market, with interest rates coming down, like the 5% cap, you want to make use of those opportunities. If you've got borrowing power, then generally use it, and that's the difference between what we're going through here to in the sort of like the formula that creates millionaires, but between the people who do it and the people who don't.
Yeah. All right. So step 1, where are we
Right. So step one. So we're going to hold that for a cycle. So we bought kind of friends, Dom and Liv. They've bought 4 properties at $500,000 each. They've done nothing else. And we all know that there can be more that happens, but just for illustration purposes, for this example, we're now just going to do nothing. They're going to go back and really focus on their careers and try and do well in their jobs, get sort of more money, all of these sort of things that you do over the next 7 to 10 years.
And there's one thing that you've missed on this stuff that I think the audience needs to consider is that you talk about holding it for a cycle. And this is where you're making sure at the beginning of the journey you're partnering with the right people.
Yes.
What happens if you don't time the cycle right, or you get into a market that it's the end of the cycle and you're waiting 7-8 years for the cycle to commence again, right? So getting that whole initial strategy right's one thing, but actually getting the cycle right's another, and that's where you've got to partner with the right people.
This is a fantastic point.
That right market at the right time.
And that's a real fantastic point and something that really needs to go into this. And when we did cover this a little bit in the pod, but here what you talk, you really want to surround yourself with the right people.
Yep.
Like great mortgage broker, as we've talked about, someone who's actually been able to sort of format this, great accountant talking about entities to buy these in and whether you should buy in a trust. That's not outside of the remit of this pod. You've got to talk to the relevant professionals, the strategist who can actually show you this. But then also just being wary. If someone like ran the barbecues just talking about property and blah, 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 and it kind of influences your decision making, you just kind of like need to cocoon yourself. Like how many times have you heard someone just say something?
And the amount of times we've seen clients that have had that discipline at the beginning, they've grinded and grafted their way through getting that deposit, and they've bought in the wrong time.
Yeah.
They've bought in the wrong cycle. And it's like we get the call. It's like, oh, I bought this property in X location. I've had it for 6 years and it's only made 10% growth. It's like, well, and then that's where journeys end.
Yeah.
Right. And
I bought an off the plan apartment, and in this shiny new building.
And we see a lot of that. Right?
Yeah, we do see a lot.
And they've got the mental and the psychological foundations to get to 18 million, these people. It's just that the actual execution was what let them down on the property.
The execution and almost a white anting of kind of all of that work. So maybe that principle was right, but they weren't informed.
Yep.
And they bought the wrong property. They might bought a house and land package in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
And now they're kind of really paying for that. So I think that's a really good point. So really surrounding yourself with like-minded people, professionals who are going to help you sort of get to that point. Absolute gold.
All right. So we've established step 1.
Yeah.
We're now moving into the next stage, step 2. Talk us about that.
Yeah, so step 2, we're calling it the acceleration principle, and this is where it gets really exciting, and some big numbers around here.
Yep.
And again, we're just going to stay low.
This is where the real compound effect starts to take place, right?
It does, and we're going to stay on this path to like 18 million portfolio. So the next step. So we've held it. Dom and Liv, they've now getting a bit more household income. They've got joy, done well in the career. Yep. Household income's now 250 to 300. But the most important bit here is that 2 million portfolio is now 4 million. Now, let's just take in the loans that they had initially. There was 1.68 million in loans. That obviously has stayed the same.
Yep.
And so now they've actually got more. They've got more options here. So the one thing when we start in step 1, there's very little sort of money to actually get deposits to get properties. Now all of a sudden we've got an abundance. And they've increased a bit of it now becomes a problem with serviceability, but they've increased sort of they've worked hard, they've realized that they need to earn a bit of money so they can actually keep borrowing. So by looking at, take the 4 million sort of valuation, if we look at an 80% sort of 4 million, say you can borrow up to 3.6. So if we extract the loan of 1.68 million to 3.6, they've got 1.52 million in equity extraction they can do here.
Wow.
How cool is that?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You can do a lot with that cash flow wise, right?
You can do a lot with that cash flow.
Talk about that in a moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just step back. You've held it for a cycle. Typically, how long does a cycle last?
So what we see in property, just historically, it's between 7 and 10 years. And so we're probably, let's be conservative around that 10 years, but generally property that we've seen sort of doubles, especially if you get in the right cycle at the right time. That's where, as we're talking about, the right team can help you with that and get into the right market at the right time. Yep. Let's just say, 10 years just to keep it straightforward, nice round number. And so all of a sudden, we're starting out sort of maybe mid-20s here, now mid-30s. And now we've got it's exciting, 1.52 million. Don't have to draw on all of that. and that would be obviously the ultra risky thing. But then what this is going to serve is deposits, and then you're going to work with your really good broker, and then he's going to model out a scenario where you can actually potentially spread that again across the tier 1 lender, which we talked about, and the tier 2 lender, and tier 3,
and also your accountant, because how you structure these also affects scalability,
as well as capital gains minimization, land tax considerations, all of this. Again, that's the professionals to talk about. But again, going back to your point about team, you go and talk to the accountant, work out exactly how best to structure this.
And our recommendation always is when you're working through this journey and we talk about talking to your team, you should always bring that team together at least once or twice a year.
Yes.
Get them all into a room. Get your BA into a room with your broker, with your accountant, have your partner with you and your strategist, and talk about everything, where it's all at that point in time.
Yes.
What your aspirations are moving forward, because things constantly change, and get everyone aligned and on that same page, and everything just becomes a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
In terms of how to execute from that point.
It is so important to be on the same page, and you just want to make, because your role here becomes, when we get to this sort of level, it's in the foundation level as well, but you're almost like a project manager.
Yeah.
And you're enlisting.
Business. You're running the business.
You're running the business, but you're engaging the best professionals in the discipline. You don't need to be the expert, but you do need to engage and listen to the principles of the people who are the experts, because that helps propel you up to the next level. Yeah. It's something I've been able to do. I'm sure it's something you've been able to do. And then just really take that advice on board, and then just keep going. And again, the thing that you've got to do is just be like a dog in a bone. Just keep that discipline, just keep pushing forward,
pushing hard.
Yeah,
always push hard.
Yeah. No, exactly. So that's it. So in this scenario, we're not going to use all of that equity because it will expire. But here you should be able to buy 6 properties at 600,000. Obviously, we've held a cycle, like prices might change. That might be 4 properties at 800,000. It would kind of relative. We can't really model out that far in advance. But let's just keep it, just for illustration purposes. So here we're able to sort of use approximately 6 deposits, say 150,000 each. So we're using a good chunk of that 1.5 million, but not using all of it. And then we're able to buy $3.6 million worth of property. So now all of a sudden a portfolio that goes from 4 million to 7.6.
Jeez.
There you go. And you can probably do, this is where the acceleration principle, what we talked about, because now you can start to look to do that in 3 years or so. Yeah. It's not 3 years, sorry, 3 properties per year.
Yeah.
And then just try and buy them as quick as possible. Like if you've got borrowing capacity, I always just go with the philosophy, if it's there, then use it and do that. So obviously we take a bit more loan. We don't have to go up to an 80% LVR on this, but with the loans here, we all of a sudden it was looking pretty exciting now, 7.6. And then we start holding again. Again, we're not presuming any more purchases after this particular point. And then we go through the cycle again. And again, we just use the same principles that we've kind of talked about a few times through this pod, like, eyes on the prize, might still be in a rent vesting situation.
So how many years are we at now between when you first started to this point?
This will be 10 years.
10 years, yep.
10 years.
Yep.
And just think about that, 10 years and then 7.6. If we look at the loans, all of a sudden, looking at around about 60% LVR, maybe a little bit more. So all of a sudden the loans start to look a little bit, a touch scary, looking at, my maths are going to be wrong here, so don't smack me on it, but around that 3.5 to 4 mil in loans. Okay. And so it's just a cost, it's a business, and how many companies grow without sort of like some debt infusion,
Exactly.
So here it's good debt, and that's the good principle, but we're off at the races again. But the important thing again is the snowball's now thundering down the mountain.
Yep.
We got sort of, as I said, 7.6 in property exposure, and now we've held for 10 years, and now we might have done those purchases over the space of 2 years, depending on how what your risk appetite is.
Yep.
But the important thing is that exposure is now right up there. So, okay. So I mean, again, we're still looking to keep the same principles, and going back to the discipline, like you can get distracted by doing the odd maybe subdivision development or whatever. But in this case, you can just keep it simple. Investing's boring, So it's just—
Haven't we all learned that? I mean, God, it's just the set and forget properties. You let the market do the work. There's just nothing better.
Yeah.
I've done developments of forced value opportunities, and then you've got your set and forgets, and just every day of the week, you look at the numbers, and then you combine the numbers and also the stress and the frustration and the emotional toll that developments can sometimes take.
Yeah.
And
blowouts.
And then you look at the blowouts. Then you look at the outcome financially against those just boring old set and forgets, and they just always win in the end, right? So
they do. If you think about development and use the same thing, you take on a lot of risk, and then probably the return's going to be about the same. If you're able, even if it's 4 properties at 800,000, for example, and the market's moved 3.2, and then you buy under market value, you get the use of that cycle that you're buying in, then that return you're going to get is going to be equal most or close to what you get with the development with not too much risk.
And to do developments, you've got to be, there's so much to it. You can't just come in and go, oh, I want to do a development.
Yeah.
In the rose-coloured glasses, I'm going to make all this money. The experts are the ones that make money in this game.
Yeah.
Not the odd, investor that has never really done it before and thinks that they can make all this money in a short period of time by putting a duplex on a block.
Yeah.
There's too much involved, there's too much complexity, and you need a lot of experience to do it right.
Yeah.
And so my view on that now, having done a few of them, done okay out of them, leave it to the experts and just focus on the simple strategies, right market, right time, set and forget property. You can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. Keep buying those properties. Keep building that sort of market value of your portfolio up, and let time do its thing, like we were talking about a second ago.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, when you're at this point in the portfolio also, you've got the option to hold, continue to hold, right, and let the compound and the market growth do its thing. But it might be coming towards the end of that cycle, and it might still have some growth left in it. But there's also options there to do something with those assets. There might be another market that's offering significant growth at the very beginning of its cycle.
Yeah.
And you might want to rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Right? And liquidate some of those and then move into a different market, a different area of the country, diversify at an earlier part of the cycle, right? So
and I think the important thing there is that you've got options. But one of the big lessons and takeaways I want people to take on this is like what you've just said, Tom. Just keep it simple. Just keep doing. Investing's boring.
Yeah,
that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And we just keep doing, keep moving forward all the time.
Yeah.
And so if we kind of again look at this and we hold another 10 years now, and we'll get into this in a second. You don't have to keep doing what we're doing, but we're just really just trying to stay along to show you how you can get to this extreme amount of wealth. So we're going to hold another cycle now. So now we are going to the more traditional established, so 20 years now.
Yep.
Maybe sort of like could be shorter if we're buying in the right market at the right time, but let's just keep round numbers, 20 years.
Yep.
All of a sudden, that portfolio value is now worth 15 million. And but the loans stay the same, and it's around that 4.95 million mark. So your LVR is now 33%. And so
combined with a rate cutting cycle at the same time, if we're talking about doing this in the last couple of years.
Well, obviously we're 20 years in the future. So who knows what's going to happen? Totally. But now you've got a string of options here, and so you've now got almost 10 million equity. Yeah.
Big number.
It's a big number, and there's really sort of a number of things that you can do with that. So we're obviously inching close to that sort of finish line of 18 million. But now we come into the third principle. So the third principle, we're calling it the diversification principle. And now this is where we're going to bring in the sort of commercial angle, or it could be a couple of other things. But really now we're looking to the next level of investing. So while we're talking about keeping it straightforward, now if we kind of fast forward, we may be looking in mid-40s at this particular time. So they're still younger than me in this particular instance if you start early. And obviously there's going to be different starting points, but even if you are starting in mid-30s, you're sort of 55 or so here. And as you can see, there's a number of options that you can do. And so here, like if you really do want to go to the next level, and that's what the point of this pod is, to talk about that. Again, it's looking at sort of like improving your income, but you might be in the situation now where you're a complete expert in whatever discipline you might be. You've worked hard, you've got pay rises, you've been working so you've got 15, 20 years work experience. So you might then want to go and set up your own business. And you might want to be a sole trader consultant where you can really get that income up from, say, the sort of 250 to 300,000 that we had before to sort of business earning might be, so let's just call it 500,000 plus. And that might sound like a long way away because, again, like if we're getting... It's not normal to get an 18 million portfolio.
No, and not a lot of people want that.
Not many people want it, but it is not normal. So if you do want that, then you have to do things that other people aren't doing. So you have to work on yourself. And so here we might then look to the business to get ultra earnings, and then we go into a different type of lending. And so with this diversification principle, you've increased your earnings again. You've got equity galore here, and then you can actually do a big refinance. And then you can, work with your broker, strategize, get everyone in the room again, like we talked about a second ago. Look at what your goals are, and you still want to keep kicking the lights out, and that's fine. We'll go into the other scenario in a second. Mm-hmm. And so you've now got the sort of borrowing power to then utilize another equity extraction. But instead of really then just keeping it, and you can keep doing this and keep buying residential portfolio, but now you're thinking, I fancy playing a bit of golf, or I fancy just taking it a bit easier. I'm now going to start scaling into more sort of cash flow type properties. Mm-hmm. But I know that the decent, and I'm going to throw over to you in a minute on this one, but we do know that the decent sort of commercial type opportunities are at a certain price point. Yeah. And so I'm going to do that equity extraction. I'm going to extract X amount of equity here, which I can do. I mean, like here you've got 10 mil to play. Like, well, it's not going to be 10 mil, but
2.3 or 2.4.
80% of 15 million you can extract up to. So it's going to be a good sort of 5 to 7 million potentially, on depending on how much you earn. Let's keep it easy. Let's just do a 2.5 to 3. I know it sounds crazy, but we are talking 20 years down the track. Imagine the numbers we're talking about today, 20 years ago. And so now you can actually take that money out from the portfolio. Then you put that as a 30% or 35%, I should say.
On cost, yep.
Yep, to put the on cost deposit, and then you can do the sort of low doc loan or the commercial lending, and then you can go out and buy $6-7 million asset and
commercial asset. So from that particular strategy, what would the numbers look like if you did that? Yeah, I mean, the greater the amount of money you're going to push into commercial, the better the tenant quality you're going to get, and the better the overall asset and less risk you're going to have more broadly. So I always say the more you've got, the better for commercial. But ultimately, whatever number that is, right, it's an easy calculation. Just work on the net yield that you're going to get from that property. And generally, commercial is going to give you between regional at the moment, probably around 6.5%, just to say. Yeah. So if you've got, I don't know, $1.5 odd million as an example, and you're getting 6.5% on that, and that $1.5 million is a deposit into, say, a $4.5 million commercial asset, then you're going to walk away with over $100,000 a year in net cash flow. It's 6.5% of that 1.5 million that you've injected, i.e. 35% of that $4.5 million commercial asset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so the idea that you could do at that point is you could either continue to keep that asset and have that as a cash flow influencer for more residential properties, right? Or you could liquidate some additional residential properties and pay that entire asset off and boost your cash flow even beyond that. Beyond that point, right? So, look, it's hard to really say what you do. I mean, every situation is so different, but fundamentally, what commercial will do is boost your cash flow, because you're getting a net cash flow, meaning that the tenant is burdened with all of the costs associated with that property, with owning the property, and the only real debt that you've got is the bank debt, right? So that helps a lot of people, continue to grow.
So we're 15 million. So in 20 years, we bought this $8 to $8 million commercial asset. I know this sounds like pie in the sky and it's not too relatable, but the whole point of this pod is to show you exactly how you can do it. You started in
how big it can go, right?
Yeah, and you started in 2005. I started sort of 2007, and that's kind of where the portfolios have sort of landed after all that time. And you can clearly see sort of our journeys through the lens of this. And so going to this $18 million sort of like kind of landmark that we're trying to get to here, the last point is to do this kind of equity extraction, use that as the deposit, 35% deposit, use the lend, we get a bit of cash flow from this commercial asset, and now we're going to be at 23 million in your portfolio. So we've blown way past the 18 million. And so that's exactly the steps that you can do to get to this sort of mark, and it's around that sort of 20-year mark to do it. And just going through that cycle, the strategy is fairly easy. The application and discipline, as we said many times, is bloody hard. So And we've just had to be single-minded. We've had to forego a lot of things on this journey, and just kept. I still drive a Ford Fiesta, and I'm going to put that on a social media post at some point. It's just got sun damage and all of this. But if you want that sort of goal, you need the Ford Fiestas, you need the pickle sandwiches and all of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. You got the Subaru too.
I've got the Subaru. Yeah, and you're enjoying that.
And you're bloody anal. How clean is the bloody thing? Look at that against my car. Holy smokes. Right.
Yeah, I don't know, but was it OCD or whatever like that? But we do try and keep it clean. So
all right. So basically, at this point in the journey, just what is the specific equity position that you're going to have?
So okay.
Then let's just assume hypothetically that you liquidate out everything. What is the equity position, and what are the earnings you could get at that point?
All right. Let's do this in two ways.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So if because we want to get to the 18 mils as per the pod, we're now going to shoot through this, and so we're going to have, and it's going to sound quite scary, 12 to 13 million in loans, and a 23 mil portfolio, and then the idea then is obviously to hold that. But then if we did nothing else after the 20 years, because this is really going to the next level, yeah. But if we're like, we're pulling up the stumps now. We've done amazingly well. We've got a 15 mil portfolio, 5 million in loans. Let's call it easy. So I've got 10 mil.
10 mil. Yep.
So now, yeah. So what are you thinking? Like divest? So sell that all down, put it into a commercial asset, into index funds, whatever it might be.
So many ways you can skin the cat. But if you just look at very, very basic mathematics, 6% on your 10 million.
Yeah.
$650,000 in annual income.
Not bad, is it?
At 6%.
6%.
Right? You could break that up into
a couple of assets.
Two commercial assets. You could have one commercial asset. You could potentially liquidate the other half into equities. You could put it into a safe superannuation fund. So you've got options, as you said, right? But whatever you do, you're looking at a big number at the end of the year in terms of the annual income you're going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, $650,000 is, that's next level, right?
It's next level. I mean, this isn't financial advice. This is two investors spitballing exactly on how we do it. But I mean, that's a pretty amazing sort of like return. Yeah. But I think the thing that we were just talking about when we were going through this sort of episode, let's just take that away from 20 years. Let's go back to 10 years. Yeah. And we go back, and we got Dom and Liv, our fictional couple, our heroes of the story, 4 million portfolio, 1.68 million in loans. I mean, you don't need to go any further. Like they've got options here, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Even $2.3 million in equity. Again, you could buy a $4.5 million commercial asset with a 35% deposit.
Yeah.
Right, $1.5 million. I think you're the numbers man. You critique me on this. I'm hopeless at this stuff.
No. Sounds about right.
And then you could also keep a really good quality asset at the same time, a residential asset to keep that. Well, I don't want to say growth because commercial still provides growth, and that's a big furphy that we all hear about, right?
You always pull me up on that.
Well, every time I have a call, I still want growth. It's like, well, hang on. If you look at the growth of the industrial asset base over the last 20 years, it's outdone residential.
Yeah.
Right? So there is significant growth in commercial. Well, let's do a potty on that to deconstruct that.
Yes.
Furphy also. But look, again, even at that asset base, that equity base, you've got options. So
if we did that, let's give it a go. It's 1.2 million. We get, say, a 3-4 million commercial asset with the kind of like net yields that you were just talking about.
Well, 6.5%, 6.5%, do your numbers.
So we're getting roughly what with the loan? Oh God, yeah, I'm really putting you on the spot and putting myself on the spot here. So, you'd be getting a bit of passive income on that already, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. So if you've got 2.3 million and you take 1.575 million out of that, then you've got $1.5 million will buy you a $4.5 million commercial asset.
Okay. So you've got one of these. So
I've got a similar one, recently purchased. Yeah, exactly. So if you earn a net yield of 6.5%, right, that $1.57 million is going to earn you just over $100,000 in net income.
Okay, you take into account the loans as well on that?
Yeah, because the income that you're generating from the tenants is covering the loans.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's after loans as well, still 100,000, yeah? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So so that's your net income on an asset, using that as an example. And you've still got, looking at those calculations, you've got $725,000 left over. So you could either increase your commercial asset even further, or you could keep a high growth residential asset and have both.
Yeah. again, it comes down to options.
It
and
does.
I think
options.
The important thing I want to call out here is, again, if you're starting in the mid-20s, and this is a 10-year cycle, yeah?
Yep.
So you're doing this at 35, and obviously just up that by 10 years, depending when you start.
Yep.
But it doesn't have to be more complicated than this. It doesn't have to be the 18 or the 25 mil portfolio. Because, I mean, it does sound ridiculous. I get it when I'm talking about it, but I'm just showing you how you can do it. But you can actually pull up. The important thing, it just gives you those options there. So if you then want to sort of maybe just go down to 3 days a week or do that, or even like we hear it a lot with clients, maybe instead of doing that, all of a sudden they can buy their dream PPOR.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong. It all depends on what goal you want to do. But if you do want to keep on the financial freedom mark, buying that commercial asset to what you're talking about makes a ton of sense to me.
And the good thing about doing that is that you're going to get your CPI increases on your tenant rental increases every year.
Yeah.
Generally, it's between 3 and 4%, right? So that income that you get in, that 102,000
It's hedged.
you're getting, it's hedged, right? So that's just going to continue to grow year in, year out. And the more cash flow you're generating into your commercial asset, the higher the value it becomes as well, right?
There you go.
So, and then you've got the natural growth effect of having a property in a good growth location anyway that will also kick it along from a capital growth perspective. So you're getting both with commercial.
Yeah, and
so,
I mean, it gives you those options. So
and set and forget assets too. You generally don't hear from my commercial properties at all.
Yeah,
but they just sit in the background. They're cash flow machines.
Yeah, it's amazing. So going back, if we're starting in the mid 40s or whatever, and you think you're too late, 10 years, you can do something like this now.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah? And then by time 55, super balance might be a bit low. Who knows? But every person's situation is different. Yep. But all of a sudden, we can see that you could be looking at 100,000 passive income in 10 years by just implementing something like this and just being smart. Like if that's a pivot from residential to commercial to get cash flow, like it's all about options.
Yep, and there's all sorts of options you've got with commercial to force value into the asset to generate a higher per square metre rate as well from your rent. That creates more cash flow, increases the value of the asset. So there's all sorts of things in the downtime, all the downtime you're going to have outside playing golf, Steve.
That's what we want.
You can do little things like that to increase those rental figures also. So yeah, I think the biggest point is flexibility and options.
Yeah.
At that point in time, at that stage, you've got it, as well as at the very end, you've got clearly a lot at play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we break this down, we've come up with a scenario. We've looked across 3 foundational sort of principles. Foundational to start with, how to build that 2 mil portfolio. We've gone into an acceleration principle. If 4 million is not enough, you really want to go to the next level. We've shown you how you can do that. And then at the third level, we looked at that diversification. If you want to then start going, you've got quite a lot of net wealth at this particular point, and you can scale into other assets. So I think one of my big things, I've been wanting to do this episode for a long time. It's obviously great to have yourself here, Tom, to go through it with.
I'm humbled, mate. Thank you.
Humbled, yeah. There we go. But again, like the system works.
Yeah,
like
it does.
And
it's not hard.
It's not hard. It's that the hard thing is the doing and the staying the course and getting knocked off course all the time. So
there's no better wealth creation asset in Australia outside property. I mean, you can start up new businesses and you can do all those things, but property is just something that's always going to deliver.
It is.
It's just such a magnificent wealth creating machine if you do it right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've detailed out those principles, shown you exactly how you can do it at each of these steps over a 20-year time horizon. I guess our challenge from Property Strats is across to that sort of viewer listening to it, and you're just thinking, how do I start? What do I get going? We've given you a bunch of ideas on how you can start, and I suppose our challenge to yourselves, like whether you use the business or I kind of we do this content to show how it's applicable, but just start doing something. Take some action. It's not as complicated as you think. We'd be excited to hear about anyone on their journeys if they're starting to implement this and how they're going. But I think that's kind of what I wanted to get.
Well, we've got a few that we've gotten to that stage one, right? Maybe we get them on the potties and they can talk to our audience about their journey and what they did, right? Some of the strategies that we helped them deploy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I spoke about Jack and the Bendigo one. He's all firing, and we've there's lots of those examples, right? And so. No.
Let's
do that.
There's a lot of examples of it. I had a client who just bought 5 properties, using this sort of acceleration principle we just talked about. They bought 3 in a day.
Wow.
3 in a day. I'm not exaggerating. So 5 properties in the space of 6 weeks. And so, but basically, it depends what kind of state you're in. They're in step number 2. Like Jack's in step number 1.
Yeah.
But he will, if he kind of does the right things, he will get to the acceleration principle. But then the important thing, he's got the options to choose what he wants to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to sort of like pull the curtain back here and just leave or put everything out there, because I think too many people talk about the $100 million portfolios, the $70 million portfolios, and there has to be a measure of income that comes into that.
Yeah, they've all got these businesses that turn over a huge amount of money, and that's how they're doing it.
Yeah. But they would have gone through the first 2 steps, but now they've gone to that. And again, you don't need to be like the two of us and where we've got to. It all depends on your personal goals, but everyone's gone through this sort of process. So if you're seeing, someone with I don't know, a 9-figure portfolio, don't feel discouraged. Like, it all depends on. You don't need to copy that. This is almost a playbook on how you can do it and get going now, and you can stop whenever you want. But you've got to do what's most important for yourself, your family, etc. So, been really exciting. I think it's been a great pod, this one.
Been good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that we're just peeling back the curtain and showing people how they can do this, right? Because so many people there's so many things that that people can do, and if we can help in some small way, then we've done our jobs.
Yeah, no. And we're buying established properties. We're buying boring properties. We're not buying house and land, off the plan apartments, or doing, big subdivision plays, or buying options on property and all this other nonsense. It's just
noise,
mathematics, numbers, investing principles has kind of come up with Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and just using that runway, using time to our advantage and getting into the right cycles at the right time.
Yep, exactly. Well, Steve, that was awesome. Thanks again for your knowledge and your wisdom and your insight. You've delivered again. How'd I go? All right?
Oh man, your host. I think we're going to have to sack you as a host. We're going to put you back in the hot seat now as the expert.
I know that, though.
Yeah, you did.
One of the best.
You did. I think you stand to the Bowls Club in a minute.
Yeah,
and I'm going to shout you. I know you like a couple of quick schooners.
Maybe we'll knock a few down. Then I've got a flight home and more people to talk to. So, mate, pumped. And thanks again for your time. And look forward to our next one. What's our next one?
Good question. Like, we've got a couple. We've got a couple coming up. So we're talking about a lot at the moment, but this is going to be one you're not going to like too much. But we're going to talk about units being potentially your best investment.
Yeah.
No, I know. Yeah. So we're going to put together something about that. But we've got to do a bit of work, right? Because one of the episodes that we really want to get it out there, we're going to we'll put our heads together the top 15 suburbs in Australia.
Yeah, right.
Are you up to that challenge?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do a bit of homework on that, and then we'll be back in a few weeks, and we'll work on that potty.
Sounds good. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.